Through the bright white slopes of White Glass Pass, a retired Navy SEAL guided 3 hikers back toward the warmth of his mountain lodge. Snow glittered on the pines, the trail markers flashed in the wind, and home was close enough to see through the trees. But when a veterinarian heard a faint cry behind the pines, she found his German Shepherd hanging from a cruel trap. That wounded dog was not only fighting to survive, he was pointing toward something hidden in the snow. Rich men had turned a protected mountain into their private hunting ground, and before the storm was over, one retired Navy SEAL, one loyal dog, and one stubborn community would have to decide what a light is truly for. If this story moves you, tell us where you're watching from, and please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can keep creating more stories like this. White Glass Pass had a way of making men honest. In summer, it dressed itself in green slopes and silver creeks, letting travelers believe the mountain was gentle. But in winter, when the snow came down thick as old memory and the wind moved through the pines like a warning sung by ghosts, White Glass showed its true face. It was beautiful, yes, beautiful enough to make a person stop breathing for a moment, but it was never kind by accident. Everett Stone understood that better than most. At 52, he moved through the cold with the calm precision of a man who had learned long ago that panic wasted heat. He stood 6 feet tall, broad through the shoulders, hard-built but not bulky, with the steady balance of someone who trusted his boots more than luck. His hair, dark brown and threaded with silver, was cut short enough to be practical, but not so sharp that it looked military anymore. A close, gray-streaked beard covered his jaw. His nose had a slight bend to it, an old break that gave his face a weathered asymmetry, as if time itself had put a thumbprint there. His eyes were the color of cold slate under morning light. People in Alder Creek called him quiet. Some called him severe. Nadine Bell, who had known him longer than most, said Everett was not severe at all. He was just a man who listened to storms before they arrived. Lantern Ridge Lodge sat beneath the eastern shoulder of White Glass Pass, a cedar and stone building that looked as if it had grown out of the mountain rather than been built upon it. Its roof carried a thick white burden through most of winter. Smoke rose from its chimney almost every evening. At dusk, the windows glowed amber against the blue snow, small squares of warmth in a world that could turn deadly between one bend in the road and the next. Everett had bought the place 7 years earlier, after selling his small house in San Diego and nearly everything else that reminded him of a life he no longer knew how to live. The lodge had been half rotten then. The porch sagged, the pipes groaned, the guest rooms smelled of dust, mouse nests, and old pine. Nadine had taken one look at the cracked kitchen tile and said, "Well, it's ugly, but ugly can be fed." So they fed it. Everett repaired the roof. He reinforced the porch. He rebuilt the old wood stove and marked the trails himself with reflective bands and carved posts that could be found even in blowing snow. Nadine took over the kitchen with the authority of a small queen reclaiming a fallen kingdom. By the second winter, Lantern Ridge Lodge was no longer merely a business. It was the place people went when the road closed behind them. A trucker once slept by the fireplace after his rig slid sideways near the lower pass. A widower from Utah spent Christmas Eve there after his rental car died in a whiteout. Twice, Everett and his German Shepherd had gone out after dark and brought back hikers who had mistaken confidence for competence. Everett never called those rescues heroic. He would only say, "They were still out there." And that was reason enough. The reason had a name Everett rarely spoke. Years after leaving the Navy, after the ceremonies were done and the handshakes had faded, he had joined a winter search team during a sudden storm near the western ridge. He had argued to close the upper route early. He had put up warnings. He had stood in the road himself and told people to turn around. One man had gone anyway. By morning, they found the hiker beneath a drift, less than half a mile from shelter. A grown man, experienced enough to know better, unlucky enough to be wrong only once. Everett had not caused it. Everyone told him that. The sheriff, the family, even the man's brother, who had pressed an old brass compass into Everett's palm and said he would have liked knowing someone tried. Everett still wore that compass on a leather cord beneath his shirt. Forgiveness, he had learned, could be heavier than blame. So he kept the lodge lit. On the morning the trouble began, the storm from the night before had passed, leaving the world bright and brittle. The sky above White Glass Pass opened pale blue, and the sun touched the snow with a clean gold that made the pines look newly born. The lodge smelled of coffee, cedar smoke, and Nadine's oatmeal, which she insisted was famous, though no one had ever proved it beyond the county line. Rook lay near the hearth with his head on his paws. The German shepherd was 6 years old, large and black-backed, with honey-gold legs and a thick ruff around his neck like a winter scarf. His left ear had a small notch at the tip, a scar from some long-ago scramble through broken brush. His amber eyes followed Everett from the boot rack to the map table, patient but accusing. "You're not coming," Everett said. Rook blinked. "That's not negotiation, that's medical advice." From the kitchen doorway, Nadine snorted. She was a round-faced woman of 64, with silver hair pinned low and a red wool cardigan rolled at the sleeves. She had a wooden spoon in one hand, which she wielded less like cookware and more like a judge's gavel. "He knows you're lying," she said. "You don't give medical advice. You give orders and hope nobody notices the difference." Everett tightened the strap on his pack. He strained his leg last night. He stood at the north window because the wind rattled the shutter. "For 4 hours. Because you stood there for 4 hours." Everett glanced down at Rook. The dog's tail moved once against the floor. Not a wag, exactly. More like a quiet vote in Nadine's favor. The faintest smile touched Everett's face and vanished before it became too visible. "Rest today," he told Rook. Rook sighed with the deep disappointment of a creature unfairly burdened by human foolishness. The side door behind the kitchen had been giving them trouble since the last storm. Everett had meant to fix the latch that morning, but a bent trail marker on the east loop had become the more urgent problem. Nadine had shoved the door hard with her hip after bringing in firewood and declared it shut. In an old lodge, declarations often did more work than hinges. By 8 o'clock, the guests had gathered near the front porch. Mara Ellis stood closest to the trail map, reading it with the focused expression of someone who trusted paper more than optimism. She was 38, a veterinarian from Denver, though the word vacation sat uneasily on her shoulders. Her chestnut hair was tied low beneath a beige knit cap, and her burnt orange winter jacket made a warm flare of color against the snow. She had the tired eyes of a woman who had cared too much for too long, but when Rook rose stiffly to greet her, something in her face softened at once. "Handsome boy," she murmured, crouching carefully instead of reaching too fast. Rook approached, sniffed her glove, and allowed one dignified scratch beneath the jaw. "That's rare approval," Everett said. Mara looked up. "He has high standards." "He thinks so." Near the porch rail, Miles Renner adjusted the lens on his camera with hands that pretended not to be cold. 44, lean, and wrapped in enough technical gear to outfit a small expedition, he had the restless humor of a man trying to stay ahead of his nerves. "So," Miles said, peering toward the white slopes, "on the official danger scale, where are we? Majestic postcard or last known photograph?" Evelyn Marsh laughed softly. She was 67, elegant in a gray wool hat and a long navy coat that looked too refined for mountain wind but somehow suited her. A retired professor, she carried herself with the quiet pleasure of someone who had spent her life reading books about beauty and had finally decided to walk into one. "Mr. Renner," she said. "I suspect if this were our last known photograph, Everett would look less bored." Everett checked the sky, then the tree line, then the slope beyond the marked path. "We stay on the east loop, no shortcuts, no wandering for better pictures, no testing the snowbank depth with your whole body." Miles lowered his camera. "That last one feels personal." "It will, if I have to dig you out." Even Mara smiled at that. For a moment, the morning felt almost light. the kind of light that could fool a man into believing the mountain had no teeth. Before they left, Everett looked back through the lodge window. Rook had returned to the hearth, but his head was raised. His amber eyes watched Everett through the glass. Between them hung the small ritual neither man nor dog had ever named. Everett touched 2 fingers to the doorframe. A promise to return. Rook's ears shifted forward. A promise to wait. The trail began gently, winding through pines heavy with snow. Sunlight fell in broken pieces across the path. Their boots made soft crunching sounds, and every now and then a branch released its white burden with a muffled thump. Everett kept the pace steady, slow enough for Evelyn, disciplined enough to preserve warmth. Mara walked near the middle, asking practical questions about wildlife patterns and winter injuries. Miles stopped often but obeyed the rules, photographing frost on bark, distant ridgelines, and once, with great solemnity, a pinecone he claimed had the emotional weight of a lonely king. Evelyn accepted the mountain with grateful silence. She paused at overlooks not to take photos, but to breathe. Everett watched all of them without seeming to. That was his habit. The old part of him counted people the way other men counted steps. 3 guests, 1 guide, east loop, visibility good, wind rising slightly from the north. Return before noon. Nothing about the morning should have worried him. And yet, halfway through the loop, he found himself touching the brass compass under his shirt. He did not take it out. He only pressed his thumb against the round shape through the fabric, feeling its edge against his chest. A memory moved beneath the surface, not sharp, not loud. A road closed too late, a warning ignored, snow-filling footprints faster than men could follow them. Mara noticed the gesture. She said nothing, which made Everett respect her more. By late morning, the lodge roof appeared between the trees below them, smoke rising in a lazy thread. They were almost home. The path narrowed along a cluster of low pines where the wind had twisted one of Everett's reflective markers sideways. It hung loose, flashing weakly when the sun hit it. Everett stopped. "Give me a minute," he said. Markers turned. Miles lifted his camera. "That feels symbolic." "Everything feels symbolic if you're cold enough," Evelyn replied. Everett stepped off the path only a few feet and worked the wire free from the branch. The marker mattered. In clear weather, it looked like nothing. In a whiteout, it could be the difference between a warm room and a frozen mistake. He tightened it carefully. When he turned back, the line had changed. Miles stood where he had been, camera at his chest. Evelyn leaned on her trekking pole, looking toward the lodge. But the spot where Mara Ellis had been was empty. Everett's body went still before his mind formed the thought. "Mara?" he called. No answer. Miles looked around, confused. She was right here. Evelyn's expression tightened. "I thought she stepped behind me." Everett scanned the snow. There were no signs of struggle, no broken branches at shoulder height, no dropped glove. Only a narrow set of fresh footprints leading off the path toward a stand of low pines already softening under the drifting snow. The mountain seemed to grow quieter. Everett's voice changed then, not louder, lower. "Miles, Evelyn, listen carefully." They did. He guided them to a shallow rock outcrop beside a reflective trail post, a spot shielded from the wind. From his pack, he took a compact emergency blanket, a whistle, and the spare radio. He placed the radio in Miles's gloved hand and closed the man's fingers around it. "If I don't call in 12 minutes, you follow the orange markers straight back to the lodge. Do not come after us. Do not guess. Do not split up." Miles had gone pale beneath his winter hat. "Us?" Everett looked toward the footprints. "Mara and me." Evelyn's mouth pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. There was fear in her face and something steadier beneath it. Trust, perhaps. Or the old academic discipline of knowing when not to interrupt a man doing necessary work. Everett checked the radio signal once, then turned toward the trees. For one breath, he thought of Rook by the fire. Warm, resting, annoyed at being left behind. Then he thought of the brass compass beneath his shirt. The weight of it seemed to grow colder. Everett stepped off the marked trail and followed Mara's disappearing footprints into the pines. Behind him, Lantern Ridge Lodge waited below the slope, its windows glowing faintly through the trees. Ahead, the snow swallowed sound. White Glass Pass was beautiful that morning, but Everett Stone knew beauty was no guarantee of mercy. Everett followed the footprints without calling Mara's name again. Sound traveled strangely in snow. A shout could break apart among the pines, roll downhill, or return from the wrong direction like a lie wearing a familiar voice. He had learned that on White Glass. He had learned it in older places too, places without pine trees, where echo and panic could turn men into ghosts before they were gone. So he moved quietly. Mara's tracks cut away from the marked trail at a sharp angle, then softened where loose powder had drifted over them. She had not been running. That mattered. A person in terror tore the snow open, kicked, slipped, staggered. Mara had moved quickly, but her stride held purpose. She had seen or heard something. Everett crouched once, touched two gloved fingers to the edge of a print, and looked ahead. Low pines crowded the slope, their branches bent under the weight of the last storm. Snow clung to them in thick white shelves. The air smelled of cold sap and iron. Iron. Everett stopped. At first, the mark on the snow looked like a fallen berry crushed beneath a boot. Then he saw another, thinner than a thread, leading toward the base of a spruce. Blood did not belong on clean morning snow, not this close to the lodge, not where tourists might wander. Not where Rook, stubborn old saint that he was, should have been sleeping beside the hearth and judging everyone's breakfast manners. Everett's jaw tightened. Then he heard it. A low, strained whimper, nearly swallowed by wind. It was not human. The sound ran through him in a way a scream might not have. A scream gave the mind something to answer. A whimper asked for mercy. He moved faster. The pines opened around a shallow dip in the ground, hidden from the trail by a curtain of snow-heavy branches. There, 20 yards ahead, Mara Ellis stood half-balanced on a low pine limb, one boot braced against the trunk, one hand gripping bark. Her burnt orange jacket burned against the white landscape like a distress flare. In her other hand, a folding knife flashed weakly as she sawed at something stretched above her. "Mara," Everett said. She flinched, nearly slipped, then caught herself with a gasp. Her face was pale, cheeks raw from cold and fear. "Everett, thank God. I couldn't get the radio. I dropped it. I see it." The radio lay below her in the snow, a small black shape half buried, its indicator light blinking like a tired eye. Then Everett looked past it. For half a second, the world narrowed so completely that even the wind seemed to stop. Rook hung caught beneath the pine, one hind leg trapped in a steel snare pulled high against the limb. His body twisted awkwardly, his thick black and gold coat clumped with snow and ice. His breath came in short bursts. His amber eyes were open. He was alive. Everett did not allow himself to think beyond that. Alive was a door. Everything else could wait outside. "Don't cut the main tension," he said, voice low. Mara swallowed. "It's tightening when he moves. I was trying to loosen it." "I know. Step down. I'm a veterinarian. I can. Step down first." The words were not harsh, but they left no room for argument. Mara looked at Rook, then at the wire, then back to Everett. For one brief instant, he saw the battle inside her. The healer who refused to leave an animal in pain, and the frightened woman who knew she was one slip from becoming another rescue. Everett moved beneath the branch and raised both hands. "Put your left foot on that knot. Good. Now give me the knife." She passed it down. Her fingers trembled, but not from weakness, from urgency, held too long. Everett took the knife, folded it, slipped it into his pocket, then steadied her by the waist as she lowered herself from the branch. She landed badly, stumbled, and caught his sleeve. "I heard him," she said quickly, "from the trail. I thought it was close. I thought it was a fox, maybe, or a dog. I only stepped away to look." Everett did not answer. His eyes were on Rook. The dog's left ear twitched at his voice. The little notch at the tip was crusted with frost. Rook tried to lift his head, failed, then fixed his gaze on Everett with a steadiness that hurt more than panic would have. "Easy," the eyes seemed to say, as if Rook were the one comforting him. Everett took one breath, then another. There would be time for guilt later. Guilt was a greedy animal. It could wait its turn. "Mara, I need you at his head," Everett said. "Keep his neck steady. If he twists when I take the weight, he'll make the leg worse." She nodded at once. Whatever fear had shaken her voice a moment before changed shape into focus. She pulled off one glove with her teeth, touched 2 fingers lightly to Rook's muzzle, then spoke in a tone so soft it seemed made for candlelight rather than snow. "Hey, sweetheart. I know. Stay with us." Rook's eyes flicked to her, then back to Everett. "He knows you," Mara said. "He knows what he's supposed to do," Everett replied. But that was not entirely true. Rook knew Everett's footsteps in a hallway. He knew the sound of the old kettle before dawn. He knew the difference between a guest laughing in the dining room and a guest trying not to cry in the mudroom. He knew when Everett's hand tightened around the brass compass beneath his shirt. Rook knew him in ways no person had ever been patient enough to learn. Everett pulled a coil of climbing line from his pack and looped it over the branch above the snare. His movements became methodical. Rope over limb, slack under chest, knot locked, weight distributed. No wasted motion. Mara watched him, one hand steadying Rook's head, the other resting near the dog's shoulder. "This isn't a normal trap, is it?" "No." "How do you know?" Everett glanced at the wire. It was too clean, too strong, too deliberately anchored, not rusted, not forgotten. Not the careless leftover of some old mountain hunter who had died before cell phones became smarter than people. Because whoever set this wanted it to hold. The sentence settled between them like another layer of cold. Mara looked down at Rook, and something in her face changed. Not fear now. Anger, but not loud anger. The kind that entered through the ribs and made a home there. Everett took Rook's weight with the rope. The dog gave one low sound, not quite a whine, and Mara bent closer. "Look at me," she whispered. "Not the leg, me." Rook obeyed. Everett cut the first strand. The wire did not give easily. It had been twisted tight around the snare loop and cinched with a small steel clamp. He had to work the blade in at an angle, then use his multi-tool to pry the tension apart. His gloves stiffened with snowmelt. His fingers began to go numb. He welcomed the numbness. Pain could make a man hurry, and hurry had ruined better men than him. At last, the clamp shifted. The snare loosened. Rook's body dropped an inch into the support line. Mara braced him with both arms, her boots sliding in the snow. "I've got him," she said through clenched teeth. "You don't have to prove anything." "I'm not proving. I'm holding." That answer reached Everett in a place he had not expected. For the first time since seeing Rook in the trap, he looked fully at Mara. Her face was frightened, yes, but her hands were steady now. Her focus was not dramatic. It was practical, fierce, almost tender. She was not a tourist anymore, not in that moment. She was a woman kneeling at the edge of harm and refusing to let go. Everett nodded once. Together, they lowered Rook. The dog came down heavy and limp with cold, not unconscious but dangerously spent. Everett gathered him against his chest before the injured leg could strike the ground. Rook's coat was soaked through. Ice clung to the long fur at his belly and tail. His body shivered in hard waves that traveled through Everett's arms. "Hypothermia risk," Mara said, already reaching. "Leg injury, soft tissue at least. I don't feel a break yet, but I need a better exam. Tell me what to do." The words came out before Everett thought about them. Mara looked up. Everett Stone did not often ask for help. Even the mountains seemed to know that. But Rook's head was tucked beneath his chin, and all the old rules had become suddenly useless. Mara softened, just for a moment. "Get him warm first. Not too fast. Wrap him. Keep his breathing steady. We need to move, but not run." Everett shrugged out of his outer jacket and wrapped it around Rook. Beneath it, His olive-drab combat shirt clung close to his frame, the camouflage sleeves dusted with snow, the horizontal bands at his biceps darkened by moisture. The cold bit through immediately, but he barely registered it. Rook lifted his head. It took effort. Everett felt every tremor of it. The dog's muzzle touched his wrist, damp and freezing. Not a lick. Not quite. A contact. An apology, maybe? Or a report. Still here. Everett closed his eyes for half a breath. "You stubborn old king," he murmured. "You were supposed to be by the fire." Mara's gaze dropped to the snow near the tree. A faint line of disturbed powder led away from the deeper woods toward the snare. Then another mark, smaller, dragged near the roots. "He may have been following something," she said. Everett followed her eyes. A few brown hairs clung to a low branch, not rooks. Deer, likely. There was another faint thread of blood near the base of the pine, older than Rook's wound and partially covered by snow. Everett understood enough. Rook had not wandered. He had answered. The side door. The weak latch. The smell of an injured animal drifting close to the lodge. Rook rising from the hearth because rest meant nothing if something out there needed finding. Everett felt guilt move in him again, sharp and eager. He shut it down. Later, he bent to retrieve Mara's radio from the snow. The casing was wet but intact. He keyed the channel. "Miles, this is Everett." Static snapped once, then Miles's voice burst through, too loud with relief. "Everett? We're here. We did not move. I would like official credit for that." "You'll get a medal made of oatmeal," Everett said. "We found Mara. We're coming back. Rook is injured." There was a brief silence. Then Evelyn's voice, closer to the radio now. "Is he alive?" Everett looked down at the dog in his arms. Yes. That was all he could safely promise. The return to the trail took longer than the distance deserved. Snow that had seemed gentle an hour earlier now fought every step. Mara walked beside Everett, watching Rook's breathing and checking the injured leg whenever he shifted. She did not fill the silence with apologies, and for that Everett was grateful. Apologies were sometimes just fear trying to make itself useful. When they reached the outcrop, Miles stood so abruptly he almost slipped. His camera hung forgotten against his chest. "Oh no," he whispered. Evelyn moved first. Without drama, she unwound the gray wool scarf from her neck and stepped toward Everett. Her hands, wrinkled and elegant, tucked the scarf around Rook's exposed side with the care of someone wrapping a sleeping child. Though Rook was no child, and the mountain had no place for softness that could not also be brave. "He found trouble before we did," she said. Everett looked at her. Evelyn met his eyes. "Dogs often do." Miles swallowed, attempting humor and failing honestly. "For the record, I would like to revise every joke I made this morning." "Denied," Nadine would have said. But Nadine was not there. The lodge was still below them, its smoke rising beyond the trees, unaware of the wound the mountain had just revealed. Everett adjusted Rook in his arms. "We go straight back," he said. "Slow. Together. No one steps off the markers." No one argued. The four of them descended through the white pines in a silence unlike the one before. The morning's beauty had not vanished. That was the cruel thing. Sunlight still glittered along the snow. The ridge still shone like carved marble. The world remained stunning enough to forgive, if a person did not know better. Everett knew better now. By the time Lantern Ridge Lodge came fully into view, Rook had stopped shivering so violently, which worried Mara more than before. She kept one hand near his ribs, counting each breath. Miles hurried ahead to open the door, boots thudding over the porch. Evelyn stayed close behind Everett, carrying the fallen radio and watching the tree line as if the forest had become a witness she did not trust. Nadine opened the front door before Miles reached it. Her face changed the moment she saw Rook. The wooden spoon in her hand lowered slowly. "Oh," she said, and the word cracked in the middle. Everett carried Rook inside without speaking. Warmth rolled over them. Firelight touched the dog's wet coat. Snow melted from Everett's sleeves onto the floorboards. Behind him, through the still-open door, White Glass Pass stood bright and silent. Everett looked back once toward the pines. The trap had not belonged there. The wire, the clamp, the placement, the old blood in the snow, none of it belonged. And if one snare had been waiting behind the trees, patient as a hidden sin, Everett knew there could be others. He stepped inside and let the door close against the cold. But in his mind, the mountain had already changed. It was no longer only beautiful. It was hiding something. Nadine Bell did not cry easily. She had once stitched her own sleeve after catching it on a nail behind the pantry. She had once chased a raccoon out of the lodge kitchen with a broom and returned to stirring stew as if defending soup from wildlife were a normal part of hospitality. She had stood through blizzards, burst pipes, power outages, and guests who believed rustic mountain lodge meant the staff could also control the weather. But when Everett carried Rook through the door, wrapped in his coat and Evelyn's gray scarf, Nadine's face crumpled before she could stop it. "Oh, you poor brave fool," she whispered. No one knew whether she meant Everett or the dog. Rook lifted his head at the sound of her voice, then let it fall again against Everett's chest. Snowmelt dripped from his coat onto the floorboards. His injured hind leg hung stiffly, the fur around it darkened with blood and ice. Mara stepped in behind Everett, already pulling off her gloves. "I need towels, warm water, clean scissors if you have them, and the brightest lamp in the room," she said. Nadine moved before Everett did. Grief was allowed one breath in her kitchen, no more. Then it had to roll up its sleeves. "Dining table?" she asked. "Too high. Floor by the hearth." "He needs warmth, but not too much too fast." Within minutes, the lodge's front room became something between a field clinic and a chapel. Miles dragged a floor lamp closer. Evelyn folded blankets into a low pad near the fire. Nadine brought towels, a basin, and the old first aid box Everett kept stocked with a seriousness some guests found excessive until the day they needed it. Everett lowered Rook onto the blankets. The German shepherd gave one low sound as his injured leg touched the floor. Everett's hand moved instantly to Rook's chest. "I'm here," he said. Mara knelt opposite him. Her orange jacket was gone now, replaced by a cream thermal shirt and a focus that made the room smaller around her. She did not ask permission before beginning. Some forms of care were too urgent for ceremony. She checked Rook's gums, pulse, breathing, temperature, then carefully began cutting away the matted fur around the wound. The scissors made small, terrible sounds. Snip, snip, snip. Rook's amber eyes stayed on Everett. Nadine stood nearby with both hands wrapped around the wooden spoon she had forgotten to put down. It was the first time Everett had ever seen her weaponless in spirit. "The door," she said suddenly. "The side door. I shut it." Everett did not look away from Rook. "I know. I shoved it hard. I heard the frame catch. Nadine, if I'd checked it twice." "Nadine." The second time his voice made her stop. Everett looked up then. His face was pale from cold, his combat shirt damp at the sleeves, but there was no accusation in his eyes. "You didn't put a trap in the woods." Nadine's mouth tightened. That should have comforted her. It did not. Blame, when it found nowhere to land, often circled back to the softest heart in the room. Mara flushed the wound with warm water. Rook's body tensed, but he did not snap. He did not pull away. The discipline in him was almost unbearable to watch. "He's tough," Miles said quietly from near the lamp. "No," Evelyn answered, just as quietly. "He trusts." That difference settled over them. Mara glanced at Everett. She saw his broad hand resting against Rook's ribs, steady enough to calm the dog, but the tendons at his wrist stood sharp. He was holding himself still with effort, not the stillness of a man without feeling. The stillness of a man afraid his feeling might break something if released. "You can talk to him," Mara said. Everett's eyes flicked to her. "He's tracking your breathing," she added. "If you go silent too long, he'll work harder to read you." Everett swallowed. Then he bent closer to Rook. "You always did hate missing a job," he murmured. "Could have left this one for me." Rook blinked slowly. Mara cleaned the wound, checked for broken bone, then wrapped the leg with careful layers. The injury was ugly enough to anger her, but not catastrophic. Soft tissue trauma, deep abrasion, circulation strained but present. Risk of infection, risk of swelling, risk of Everett Stone blaming himself for every second of it. She had no bandage for that last one. When the dressing was done, Rook lay with his head against Everett's knee. His breathing steadied. His shivering softened into occasional tremors. Nadine finally set down the spoon and brought a bowl of broth, which Rook ignored until Everett dipped 2 fingers in it and touched them to the dog's muzzle. Only then did Rook drink. Not much. Enough. Mara watched the exchange with a quiet ache she did not expect. She had treated thousands of animals. She had seen grief in exam rooms, love in waiting rooms, fear disguised as impatience at reception desks. But this was different. Rook was not a pet arranged around Everett's life. He was a living beam inside the structure of it. If that beam broke, she thought, the lodge itself might still stand. Everett might not. By late afternoon, the guests had gone quiet in the particular way people do after danger brushes past them and leaves them ashamed of every trivial complaint they made before it arrived. Miles reviewed the photos he had taken earlier, then stopped and put the camera down as if beauty had become temporarily inappropriate. Evelyn wrote notes in a small pocket journal, not for publication, not for drama, but because order was her way of respecting truth. Everett stood at the window, looking toward the tree line. Mara came up beside him. He shouldn't move tonight except to relieve himself. I know. You should rest, too. I know that less. She almost smiled. Almost. You're going back out, she said. It was not a question. Everett's gaze stayed on the pines. There may be more. There probably are. That made him look at her. Mara folded her arms. Not defensively, but against the chill that seemed to live deeper than the room now. That snare wasn't old. It wasn't set by accident. People who set one trap usually set a line. You've seen that? I've treated what comes out of them. The sentence carried its own history. Everett did not ask for it. Not yet. Some wounds showed themselves when they were ready, and some bit if handled too soon. Behind them, Rook lifted his head. Not much, only an inch. His ears turned toward Everett. The dog was half asleep, sedated by pain and warmth, yet the moment Everett shifted toward the door, Rook knew. The movement was so small, no one else might have noticed. Mara noticed. Everett noticed more. Rook tried to push his front legs beneath him. No, Everett said at once. Rook froze, not from obedience alone, but from the strain of wanting. Everett crossed the room and knelt beside him. For a moment, all the command left his posture. He placed one hand over Rook's neck, thumb brushing the thick fur beneath the collar. You hold the house, he said softly. I'll take the trees. Rook stared at him, amber eyes bright in the firelight. It was not permission. It was not surrender. It was a wounded soldier forced to accept a different post. Mara turned away first, not because she was embarrassed, but because tenderness that private deserved a little cover. Dusk came early. Everett put on a dry outer jacket over the olive-drab shirt, packed flagging tape, a flashlight, evidence bags, his phone, and a GPS unit. Mara joined him at the mudroom in a dark wool hat and borrowed snow gaiters from Nadine. You're not going alone, she said. Everett looked at her boots, then at her face. This isn't a guided walk. Good. I didn't pay for one. Mara, I know what traps look like. I know how not to contaminate a wound site. And if there's an injured animal out there, you'll need me before you need pride. Nadine from the kitchen called, She's got you there. Everett closed his mouth. Miles appeared with his camera bag. I can document without touching anything. Everett began to object. Evelyn raised one finger from the armchair near Rook. And I will remain here with Nadine and our patient, because someone must be sensible and old enough to admit knees have limits. That settled it. They returned to the trees under a sky turning violet. The warmth of the lodge fell away behind them, replaced by the clean, hard smell of snow after sunset. Everett led. Mara followed close. Miles walked behind, quieter now, camera ready but flash disabled. At the pine where Rook had been trapped, Everett paused. In fading light, the scene looked smaller, less dramatic. That angered him. Evil often did. By daylight, it could seem like debris, a mistake. Something explainable if one wanted comfort badly enough. Mara crouched, near the blood trail. This one's Rook's, but that one there older, different pattern. Deer? Likely. Everett marked the coordinates. They widened the search in a careful grid, staying within sight of one another. It took less than 15 minutes to find the second snare. It was set near a narrow game trail between two young aspens, loop hidden beneath loose powder, anchor line tied low and clean. A deer moving through would step into it before seeing anything. A dog following scent would do the same. Miles photographed from 3 angles. No one spoke. The third trap sat near a frozen creek where animal tracks gathered at the only open water left beneath a lip of ice. The fourth was worse. It had been placed near a secondary footpath, a route Everett sometimes used in spring with experienced hikers. In heavy snow, a human boot could have caught it. Mara stared at that one for a long moment. "This could have taken a person down," she said. Everett's voice was flat. "Yes." Near the creek, Miles found the shell casings. He did not touch them. He simply knelt, photographed, then looked at Everett with all humor gone from his face. "These aren't old." "No," Everett said. A scrap of camouflage fabric hung from a broken twig nearby, snagged and fluttering faintly in the wind like a torn flag from some small, shameful war. Everett photographed it, then bagged it with gloved hands. The mountain around them darkened. For the first time that day, Everett felt something colder than worry. Design. This was not a single cruelty. It had a pattern. It knew the land. It knew where animals passed, where people rarely checked, where snow could hide wire until spring or death uncovered it first. White Glass Pass was not being wounded by ignorance. Someone had studied where to cut. Back at the lodge, Everett made the calls. The first was to the Alder Creek Municipal Office. He left a detailed message with location coordinates, photographs, and a request for immediate response. The second was to the local ranger station. A tired man named Deputy Ranger Cole answered on the third ring. His voice carried the exhausted courtesy of someone already standing beneath too much paperwork. "I hear you, Mr. Stone," Cole said after Everett explained. "But with the storm damage, we're stretched thin. These traps are new." "I'm not disputing that. They're in a restricted zone. I understand." One was close enough to a footpath to injure a hiker. A pause. Then Cole lowered his voice. "Off the record, you need to document everything and send it above local." Everett's hand tightened around the phone. "Why?" Another pause. Longer. "Because this week is not a good week for Alder Creek to admit there's illegal hunting on White Glass." "That's not an answer. It's the answer I can give and keep my job." The line went quiet, except for the small crackle of poor mountain reception. Cole spoke again, softer. "There's pressure. Tourism board, mayor's office, private development people. Everyone wants the pass looking safe and profitable." Everett looked toward the fire, where Rook slept under Evelyn's watchful eye. "Safe and profitable," he repeated. "I'm sorry," Cole said. Everett ended the call without saying goodbye. By then, Nadine had made coffee no one wanted and stew everyone needed. Mara sat at the dining table, writing a clean medical report on Rook's injuries. Miles transferred photos to Everett's laptop. Evelyn arranged times, names, locations, and observations into neat columns with the discipline of a woman who had spent decades teaching students that facts were not less powerful for being calm. It was Evelyn who first said the name aloud. "Vance Summit Club," she murmured. Everett looked up. Miles turned the laptop toward him. One of the distant photos from earlier that morning, taken before Mara disappeared, showed a ridgeline beyond the trees. Far off, nearly hidden near a service track, sat the faint shape of a white utility ATV with a dark emblem on the side. Miles zoomed in until the image blurred, then sharpened enough to show a stylized silver V. "I've seen that logo in town," Miles said. "On those luxury shuttle vans." Nadine's expression hardened. "Harland Vance." Mara looked from one face to another. "Who is he?" "The richest man in the county," Nadine said. "Which around here means he owns things that aren't for sale and people who swear they aren't bought." Everett said nothing. Nadine went on, voice low. "His son Troy runs with Blaine Whitcomb, Mayor's boy. Too old to be called a boy, too spoiled to be called a man." Miles gave a humorless breath. "They hunt? They party," Nadine said. "They call it sport when animals are involved." Everett stared at the small silver V on the screen. He did not want rumor. Rumor was a weak rope. It snapped when weight mattered. But the traps were real. Rook's wound was real. The casings, the tracks, the hidden snare near a human path, all real. So he opened a folder on the laptop and named it White-a-Glass Incident. Then he began sorting evidence. Rook slept through most of it, but not deeply. Each time Everett rose from the table, one amber eye opened. Each time the front door creaked, Rook's ears shifted beneath the blanket. He could not stand guard with his body, so he did it with attention. Near midnight, Everett stepped close to the hearth and crouched beside him. "You don't have to watch," he said. Rook's eye remained open. Everett exhaled slowly. Of course he did. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and soundless, covering the tracks they had left in the woods. By morning, the mountain would look innocent, white, untouched, like nothing had happened beneath its pines. But on Everett's table, there were photographs, coordinates, a medical report. Shell casings logged but undisturbed, a strip of camouflage fabric sealed in plastic, and beside the fire lay a wounded German shepherd who had followed a cry into the trees and brought back the first piece of a truth no map had named. Everett sat awake long after the lodge went quiet. This time, he did not touch the brass compass beneath his shirt. He touched the evidence folder instead. Pressure did not arrive like a storm. Storms were honest. They announced themselves with a falling barometer, a hardening sky, a change in the smell of the wind. White-Glass Pass never pretended a blizzard was anything other than a blizzard. Pressure came wearing polished shoes. 2 mornings after Everett sent the evidence folder to the Alder Creek Municipal Office and the local ranger station, a county vehicle climbed the lodge road just after breakfast. It was a white SUV with a city seal on the door and tires that looked too clean for mountain work. Nadine saw it first from the kitchen window. "Well," she said, drying her hands on her apron, "that car has never carried firewood in its life." Everett looked up from the front desk, where he had been checking trail conditions with one eye and watching Rook with the other. Rook lay on a folded blanket near the hearth. His injured hind leg was bandaged cleanly. Propped on a rolled towel, Mara had changed the dressing at dawn, her hands gentle but exact, and Rook had tolerated the process with the grave dignity of a wounded king receiving unwelcome court physicians. He was better than he had been the night before. That did not mean he was well. When the SUV doors opened outside, Rook lifted his head, not sharply, not with the old fluid readiness. Pain had put a tax on every motion, but his ears rose, and his amber eyes fixed on the window. Everett stood. The man who entered wore a gray county jacket, a pressed shirt, and the cautious expression of someone sent to deliver bad weather in human form. His name tag read D. Halpern. He was perhaps 40, narrow-shouldered, with careful hair and a clipboard held like a shield. "Mr. Stone?" he asked, though he clearly knew. Everett came around the desk. "Yes, I'm with the Alder Creek Compliance Office. We received notice of a trail incident involving one of your guided guests." Mara, seated near the hearth with her medical bag open beside her, looked up at once. Everett's voice stayed level. "A guest heard an animal in distress and stepped off the marked trail. I retrieved her. No guest was injured." Halpern glanced at Mara, then quickly away. Shiv witnesses complicated paperwork. "Still, we'll need to review your winter guiding permit, emergency response protocol, trail signage updates after the last storm, and lodging safety certifications." Nadine emerged from the kitchen with a coffee pot. Would you like coffee before you start pretending this is routine? Nadine, Everett said. What? Hospitality is still legal, isn't it? Halpern cleared his throat. This is only a preliminary review. But preliminary reviews, Everett had learned, could carry knives hidden inside polite folders. By noon, another truck arrived. 2 inspectors checked the boiler room, the wood stove clearance, emergency exits, snow load records, generator maintenance logs. They were not hostile. That made it worse. Hostility, at least, had a face. This was procedure with its eyes lowered. One inspector, a large man with kind hands and a beard full of frost, muttered while checking the backup generator. For what it's worth, this thing's better maintained than the county annex. Then why are you here? Everett asked. The inspector did not meet his eyes. Because my supervisor told me to be. By late afternoon, 3 separate forms sat on the front desk. A request for additional documentation, a warning of operational review, a temporary restriction on guided winter routes pending investigation. Everett read them once, then again. The language was clean, professional, and bloodless. It did not mention traps. It did not mention Rook. It did not mention shell casings or snares or pressure from people who preferred mountains to remain profitable and quiet. It only said Lantern Ridge Lodge might represent an unresolved safety concern. Mara stood beside him while he read. Her hair was tied low, and there were shadows beneath her eyes from staying up with Rook. "They're using me," she said. Everett folded the paper. "They're using the incident. I can write a statement." "You already did." "I can write a louder one." The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. "Veterinarians have volume settings?" "We do when someone annoys us." From the hearth, Rook gave a low breath that sounded suspiciously like agreement. For 3 days, the lodge changed without changing. The fire still burned. Nadine still made soup. Snow still gathered on the porch rail, and Everett still cleared the steps before sunrise. But the guests left early, unnerved by the official vehicles and whispered phone calls. Miles returned to Denver, though not before giving Everett copies of every photograph and promising, with no joke in his voice, that he would answer if called. Evelyn stayed 1 extra night to help organize notes, then left a handwritten timeline on the dining table, each page clipped neatly and labeled. Mara did not leave. She told Nadine that Rook should not be moved while the swelling remained active. She told Everett that the bandage needed monitoring. She told herself that both things were true enough to stand behind. The deeper truth sat less comfortably. In Denver, her clinic calendar had become a wall she kept walking into. 12-hour days. 15-minute appointments. People who loved their animals but expected miracles between credit card swipes. She had gone into veterinary medicine because creatures in pain did not lie. Somewhere along the way, she had become fluent in invoices, apologies, and exhaustion. But here, beside a wounded German shepherd who had followed the scent of another animal in trouble, Mara felt something in herself begin to breathe again. Not peace, purpose. That third evening, as she changed Rook's dressing, Everett stood nearby, pretending not to hover. "You can sit," she said. "I'm fine." "You're not the patient." "Still fine." Rook turned his head and looked at Everett with slow judgment. Mara glanced at the dog. "He disagrees." Everett sat. A faint smile touched Mara's face, and for a moment the room allowed softness. Outside, wind dragged loose snow along the windows. Inside, Rook rested his muzzle against Everett's boot while Mara worked. The bandage came away cleaner than before. "That's good," she said. "Swelling's still there, but infection hasn't set in." Everett exhaled quietly, as if he had been holding the breath since the forest. Mara looked at his hands. They were scarred, blunt, steady. One thumb rested unconsciously near the brass compass beneath his shirt, but he did not touch it. "Everett," she said, "you know this wasn't your fault." He did not answer. "I mean the trap," she added. His eyes stayed on Rook. "The door latch was bad. Doors break. Dogs follow scent. Cruel people set traps. That's a clean way to divide the world." "No," she said. "It's a necessary one." He looked at her then. There was no accusation in her face, no easy comfort either. Mara did not offer the bright, useless mercy of people who wanted pain to end because it made them uncomfortable. She simply held the line between responsibility and punishment. Everett looked away first. Before he could answer, headlights swept across the front windows. Not county white this time, black. A long SUV rolled into the drive and stopped near the porch with the smooth confidence of a vehicle accustomed to valet loops and private roads. The driver stepped out first, then opened the rear door. Harlan Vance emerged as if the cold had been invited to behave. He was tall, silver-haired, and immaculate, in a charcoal wool overcoat that probably cost more than Everett's first truck. His gloves were black leather. His boots had touched snow only because there was no one available to remove it from the world before he arrived. He paused at the bottom of the steps and looked at Lantern Ridge Lodge with the calm interest of a man assessing a property line. Nadine saw him through the dining room window. "Oh, no," she said. "Absolutely not." Everett moved toward the door. Mara stood. "Who is that?" "The reason paperwork learned to climb a mountain," Nadine replied. Harlan did not knock like a man requesting entry. He knocked like a man giving a building the opportunity to recognize him. Everett opened the door, but did not step aside. "Mr. Stone," Harlan said. His voice was warm, educated, and unpleasantly patient. "I hope I'm not intruding." "You are," Harlan smiled. A lesser man might have been offended. Harlan seemed amused, as if directness were a regional dialect he had chosen to tolerate. "I'll be brief then. That would be new for men in expensive coats." Behind Everett, Nadine made a small sound that might have been a cough and might have been approval. Harlan's pale blue eyes moved past Everett for 1 second, taking in the fire, the front desk, Mara near Rook, the old beams, the worn floor polished by years of boots. His gaze paused on the German shepherd's bandaged leg. "Unfortunate business," he said. Everett's hand tightened on the doorframe. "Is that what you call it?" "I call it what it is until evidence proves otherwise." Evidence was sent. To the appropriate offices, I'm sure. Harlan adjusted one glove at the wrist, a small, precise motion. "And the appropriate offices will determine what deserves action." Mara stepped forward before Everett could answer. A dog was caught in a fresh snare in a restricted wildlife corridor. "That deserves action." Harlan turned his attention to her. His smile did not change, but it cooled. "And you are?" "Dr. Mara Ellis, veterinarian. Visiting? For now. How generous of you to lend certainty to a place you've known for 3 days." Mara's face colored, but her voice remained steady. "Certainty doesn't require residency. The wound is real." Harlan looked back at Everett. "I came because I respect what you've tried to build here," he said. "A charming lodge, a noble sentiment, but White Glass is changing. Tourism is changing. Liability is changing. A small, independent operation like this, however well-intentioned, can become a danger to itself and to others." Everett said nothing. Harlan continued, gentle as falling ash. "Vance Summit Club has resources, medical staff on call, professional trail management, heated transport. We've considered expanding our safety network along this side of the pass. Your property would be a natural cornerstone." Nadine came to the entry behind Everett. "There it is." Harlan inclined his head toward her. "Mrs. Bell?" "Miss Bell," she said. "And my soup has more right to this mountain than your shuttle vans." For the first time, irritation touched Harlan's face. It vanished almost instantly. "I'm offering a conversation," he said to Everett, "before circumstances make decisions for you." Everett finally spoke. "Lantern Ridge isn't for sale. Everything is for sale eventually." "No." Harlan studied him. The wind moved snow across the porch between them. Then he smiled again, softer and worse. "Sometimes keeping a light burning too long can set the whole house on fire." The words entered the lodge and stayed there after he turned away. Harlan descended the steps. His driver opened the SUV door, and within a minute, the black vehicle was gone, leaving only tire tracks pressed into the snow like a signature. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Nadine said, "I should have hit him with the spoon." Mara looked at her. Would that help legally? No. Emotionally? Yes. Everett closed the door. Rook was awake now. He had lifted his head, eyes fixed not on the road where Harland had vanished, but on Everett, not alarmed. Watching, Everett crossed the room and knelt beside him. The apology rose in him before he could stop it, old and useless and bitter on the tongue. "I let the mountain get too close to you," he said quietly. Rook's ears shifted. Mara heard. Nadine heard. Neither interrupted. Everett rested one hand near Rook's collar, careful not to disturb the bandaged leg. "You were supposed to be safe here." Rook looked at him with a steady patience. Animals sometimes give foolish humans who mistake love for control. Then he lowered his muzzle onto Everett's wrist. Not forgiveness. Something older than forgiveness. Presence. Nadine turned away, busying herself with cups that did not need washing. The next morning, the temporary suspension notice arrived. It was taped to the front door by a young clerk who refused coffee, avoided eye contact, and left so quickly his boot prints looked embarrassed. 7 days, pending safety review. Guided operations suspended. Emergency lodging services under evaluation due to unresolved compliance concerns. Everett stood on the porch reading the notice while snow drifted down around him. 7 days, on paper, was nothing. A week. A pause. A minor inconvenience phrased in municipal language. On White Glass, 7 days could mean a stranded driver with no fire, a lost hiker with no door to knock on, a storm moving faster than forecasts, and a light gone dark at the worst bend in the road. Behind him, Nadine began making calls. Not official calls, better ones. She called Hank, the trucker who had slept beside the stove during the Ash Wednesday whiteout. She called the elderly couple from Laramie who still sent Christmas cards addressed to Everett, Nadine, and His Highness Rook. She called a ski instructor who had once followed Rook's bark through blowing snow back to the lodge. She did not ask them to protest. Nadine hated the word protest. It sounded too much like shouting and not enough like feeding people. She asked them to remember. By noon, the phone at Lantern Ridge would not stop ringing. Some offered statements. Some offered money. One man offered a generator. Another offered his nephew, who was mostly useful if told exactly what not to touch. Nadine wrote everything down in a flour-dusted notebook. Her wooden spoon laid beside it like a sword, retired only temporarily. While she built her little army of grateful survivors, Everett received an email from the state ranger office. The sender was Lena Hartwell. The message was short. Send all original files. Do not disturb additional sites. I know White Glass. If your coordinates are accurate, local review is not enough. Everett read it twice. Mara leaned over his shoulder. Good? Maybe. That's more than we had yesterday. Later that afternoon, Lena called. Her voice was crisp, low, and unsentimental. Mr. Stone, I've reviewed the images. I'm not confirming anything until I inspect the sites myself. I wouldn't ask you to. Good. I dislike being asked to believe men because they sound certain. Everett almost smiled. You'll fit in here. I'm not coming to fit in. I'm coming to verify. Those coordinates sit inside a protected corridor. If the traps are as recent as they appear, someone is either reckless, connected, or both. Both, Everett said. A pause. Then be careful using names before the evidence can carry them. Everett looked toward Rook, sleeping in the firelight with one ear still half raised. When can you get here? Tomorrow, if the pass holds. The line went quiet for a beat before Lena added, And Mr. Stone? Yes. If Vance is already moving paperwork against you, assume he knows more than you think. The call ended. Everett stood with the phone in his hand. Outside, the mountain shone in late daylight, white and calm and falsely innocent. Inside, Lantern Ridge Lodge was dimmer than usual. Not dark, never dark. But some of the lights had been switched off to save generator fuel until they knew whether county inspectors would make the utility review more complicated. Rook slept near the hearth, drugged lightly for pain. His breathing was heavy but even. Everett sat beside him after dinner while the lodge murmured around them. Nadine on the phone, Mara washing instruments, wind tapping the windows with tiny fingers. He leaned close to Rook. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Rook opened one amber eye. "I built this place so no one would get caught out there again," Everett said. "Then you did." Rook did not understand guilt. Or perhaps he understood it better than men and refused to worship it. His head shifted, just enough for his muzzle to rest against Everett's boot. Everett sat very still. Love, he thought, had never been the power to keep harm away from everything you cherished. That was a child's bargain with a world that never signed it. Love was staying after the wound. Love was turning back toward the one who needed you, even when snow covered the road and rich men smiled at your door. Outside, White Glass Pass darkened. Inside, Lantern Ridge kept one lamp burning in the front window. Not many. One. For now, one was enough. Mara did not like the swelling. She said it in the calm way doctors used when they were trying not to frighten the room. But Everett heard the change beneath her voice. The bandage on Rook's hind leg had stayed clean. The wound had not turned angry or foul. But by morning, the tissue around the injury had puffed tighter than she wanted, and Rook had begun holding the leg just slightly away from the floor. "Denver has imaging equipment I don't have here," Mara said, repacking her medical bag beside the hearth. "I don't think there's a fracture. But I'd rather know than hope." Everett looked at Rook. The German shepherd lay with his head raised, amber eyes moving between them. His black and gold coat had dried into thick waves around his shoulders. The bandage on his hind leg looked too white against him, like a flag he had never agreed to carry. "Can he handle the drive?" Everett asked. "If we pad the seat, keep him still, and avoid rough road as much as possible, yes." Mara hesitated. "And Everett?" He looked at her. "He needs to be a patient now, not a partner on duty." The words landed where they were meant to land. Everett had known men who loved their own toughness so much they mistook pain for permission. He would not do that to Rook. Not because the dog wanted to follow. Not because Everett wanted the comfort of him at his side. So he nodded. "We go." Nadine packed as if they were crossing the continent instead of driving down toward Denver. A thermos of broth for Rook. Sandwiches wrapped in brown paper. 2 wool blankets. A bag of oatmeal cookies Mara had not asked for but accepted after Nadine gave her the kind of look that made refusal a moral failure. "You call when you reach cell range," Nadine said. Everett lifted Rook carefully into the back of the truck. Mara had layered blankets into a nest across the seat, and Rook settled with visible reluctance. He did not whine. That somehow made it worse. Nadine stood on the porch, arms crossed over her apron beneath a heavy coat. Behind her, Lantern Ridge Lodge looked dim in the pale morning, its front windows reflecting snow instead of firelight. The suspension notice still sat taped to the door, fluttering lightly whenever the wind found its edge. 7 days, a little piece of paper pretending it could understand winter. Everett shut the truck door. Rook raised his head. "Easy," Everett said. "We're getting you looked at." Rook did not seem persuaded. They left Lantern Ridge under a sky the color of old tin. Mara sat in the back beside Rook, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder to keep him from shifting too much. Everett drove slowly, choosing the smoother line through the snow-packed road, avoiding ruts when he could. Every bump made him tighten his grip on the wheel. For the first 10 minutes, no one spoke. Then Mara said, "He's watching the trees." Everett glanced in the mirror. Rook's head had turned toward the right side of the road. The slope there fell into a stand of young pines, the same outer edge of forest that curled behind the lodge and toward the place where he had been trapped. "Rook," Everett said. The dog's ears rose. His body changed. Not dramatically, not the kind of movie alert that announced itself with barking and lunging. His muscles simply gathered beneath the blanket. His nose lifted. A low sound formed in his chest. Quiet and deep, not aggression, not pain, recognition. Mara felt it under her hand. "Everett, I see it. You said he's a patient. He is." The truck rolled another 20 yards. Rook pushed his front legs beneath him. "No!" Mara said sharply, pressing him back with both hands. "Absolutely not." Rook did not fight her, but his eyes stayed fixed on the trees. His breath came faster now, fogging the window. A thin tremor moved through him, different from pain. Everett stopped the truck. Mara looked toward the front seat. "We can't let him walk around the woods." "I'm not going to." He put the truck in park, but left the engine running. For a moment he sat still, listening to the soft tick of the heater and Rook's low breathing behind him. Then he opened his door. Cold entered the truck at once. Mara followed him out, anger and worry tangled across her face. "Everett, if this is about proving he's still useful, it isn't." "Then what is it?" Everett opened the rear door only halfway. Rook lifted his head into the wind. His nostrils worked, his ears shifted, first forward, then slightly left. Everett watched. Rook did not try to jump out. He simply stared into the pines, entire body held by some invisible line. "He's not asking to work," Everett said. "He's telling us something is wrong." Mara's expression changed. Not agreement yet, but attention. "5 minutes," she said. "He stays on the road unless I say otherwise." "Fair. He does not run. He won't. And if he starts favoring the leg more, we turn back." Everett nodded. They helped Rook down from the truck with a folded blanket used as a sling beneath his belly. His paws touched the road. He stood carefully, weight mostly on 3 legs, the injured hind leg barely pressing into the snow. Mara clipped a short lead to his collar, keeping him close enough that he could not surge forward. Rook breathed the wind again. Then he looked at Everett. It was not command he wanted. It was trust. They followed the direction of his nose, but slowly, painfully slowly. Rook did not lead like a hero charging into legend. He took a few steps, stopped, inhaled, shifted his ears, then looked toward a gap between the pines. Everett went ahead to test the snow. Mara stayed beside Rook, one hand ready beneath his chest. The forest dipped into a shallow ravine hidden from the road by brush and storm-fallen branches. At first, there was nothing but white. Then Everett saw the shape. A doe lay half-sheltered beneath a crooked pine, her body trembling in the snow. One foreleg was caught near the ground in another snare, this one not lifted high but cinched cruelly around the limb. She had thrashed until the snow around her was churned gray. Her sides heaved. Mara's breath caught. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, and the words carried no sweetness, only sorrow sharpened into action. Everett held up one hand to keep Rook back. The dog obeyed, but every line of him leaned toward the wounded animal. Mara moved carefully, low and slow, speaking in a steady voice. The doe's eyes rolled, wild with terror. Everett circled wide to reduce the tension on the snare, using a branch to pin the wire without putting his hands near panicked hooves. The rescue took 15 minutes and felt longer. When the snare finally came loose, the doe staggered, nearly fell, then limped into the trees. Mara did not chase her. She only watched until the animal disappeared. Rook watched too. His body softened only after the doe was gone. Everett looked beyond the pine. Something darker sat farther up the ravine. Not a trap. A low run of camouflage netting, half buried under fresh powder, stretched between stakes driven into the frozen ground. Beside it stood a temporary panel fence, the kind that could be assembled and removed quickly. Snow covered most of the tracks, but not all. Hoof marks, boot prints, tire ruts from a compact off-road vehicle. Mara came to stand beside Everett. "This wasn't just a trap line," she said. "No, someone was holding animals here." The ravine suddenly felt less like a piece of forest and more like a room built by men who did not want witnesses. Everett moved carefully along the edge, photographing everything before stepping close. Rook remained with Mara near the road-facing side, trembling now from cold and effort. Everett saw that and hated himself for every extra minute. Then Rook's nose dipped toward a mound of snow beneath a leaning branch. He made a small sound. Mara knelt, brushed away the powder, and uncovered a black plastic casing, a trail camera. Its mounting strap was torn. The lens cracked, but the memory card slot remained closed. Everett took an evidence bag from his coat. Mara looked at him. "This could be important." "It is. You don't know that yet. I know someone dropped it where they shouldn't have been." They returned to the truck with Rook wrapped tight and exhausted. This time, when Everett lifted him into the back seat, Rook did not resist. He sank into the blankets, eyes half-lidded, the duty in him dimmed by the body's demand for rest. Mara looked at Everett across the open door. "We still need Denver. We'll go. And this?" He held up the evidence bag. "We call Lena first. They got enough signal 2 miles down the road." Everett pulled onto the shoulder and sent photographs of the ravine, the doe's snare, the netting, the tracks, and the trail camera to Lena Hartwell. Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Do not handle the camera further. Bring it to the lodge. I am rerouting now." Then a second message. "This changes the scale." By mid-afternoon, Lena Hartwell arrived at Lantern Ridge in a dark green State Ranger truck dusted with road salt. She stepped out without hurry, as if hurry were a luxury she had long ago stopped trusting. She was tall and lean in a forest green field jacket, black hair tucked under a wool cap, a mustard-yellow waterproof notebook already in one gloved hand. She did not introduce herself with warmth. "Stone?" "Everett." Her eyes moved to Mara. "Dr. Ellis?" "Yes." Then to Rook, who lay near the hearth again, asleep despite himself. Lena's face did not soften exactly, but her gaze paused. "That the dog?" "That's Rook." She nodded once. Then he found more than one sight. Everett handed her the sealed bag containing the camera. "We didn't open it." "Good." Lena set it on the table, photographed the bag, documented the time, then carefully removed the memory card with gloved hands. Miles was gone, Evelyn gone, but their order remained behind. Labeled folders, printed maps, time logs. Lena noticed. "Who built this file?" she asked. "Everyone," Everett said. "Good answer." The laptop took a long minute to read the card. No one spoke while the thumbnails loaded. When they did, Mara's hands curled into fists. The images were time-stamped. Night shots first. Deer moving through the ravine. Men in winter hunting gear. A white ATV with the silver Vance Summit emblem. Then daylight photographs, clearer. Troy Vance, grinning beside a snare line, his snow camouflage jacket bright under the sun. Blaine Whitcomb in a dark green coat, one hand raised to block the camera too late. 2 other adult men carrying rifles. A crate, netting, the panel fence. Lena did not react loudly. She only took out her yellow notebook and began writing. Mara looked at Everett. "That's enough, isn't it?" Lena answered without looking up. "Enough to escalate. Not enough to prove the whole operation." Everett's face stayed still. Lena glanced toward him. "You want this to survive lawyers, Mr. Stone? Then you don't need outrage. You need structure." Before Everett could respond, someone knocked on the lodge door. Not Harlan's polished knock. This one barely sounded at all. Nadine opened the door to a thin man in a worn brown work jacket, snow clinging to his shoulders. He stood on the porch like someone who had walked all the way to confession and lost courage at the threshold. His name was Wes Calder. Everett knew his face vaguely from town. Maintenance work, supply runs. A man often seen near Vance Summit Club loading tools into the back of a dented pickup. Mid-40s, narrow and tired, with rough hands and eyes that did not want to meet anyone's for too long. "I need to talk to Ranger Hartwell," Wes said. Lena turned slowly. Wes stepped inside, then stopped when he saw Rook by the fire. The dog opened his eyes. No growl, no bark, just a long, steady look. Wes's face broke in a small, terrible way. He removed his cap. "I didn't know they'd set one that close," he said. The room went still. Everett took one step forward. Lena lifted her hand, not to stop him forcefully, just enough to remind the room that truth came better when not frightened back into hiding. Wes reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded map, a thumb drive, and a packet of receipts sealed in a plastic grocery bag. "I built some of the temporary fencing," he said, voice rough. "Installed cameras, too. Troy said it was for wildlife monitoring, private land studies, resort expansion surveys. He swallowed. I knew that was thin. I just didn't ask. Nadine's face hardened. Why not? Wes looked at her, then down at his boots. My wife's insurance runs through Vance Maintenance. She's got treatments. I thought if I kept my head down. He stopped. The key ring at his belt trembled with a small metallic chatter as his hand shook. I thought silence was cheaper. Everett's voice was quiet. It wasn't. Wes nodded. No, he said. It wasn't. He unfolded the map on the dining table. Red pencil marked 5 sites around the protected corridor. One was the ravine. One was near the creek. One sat uncomfortably close to the secondary path Everett had found. Lena leaned over the map. Who gave you these locations? Troy. Sometimes Blaine delivered messages when Troy didn't want his name in writing. Do you have proof? Wes slid the thumb drive forward. Texts, work orders, photos of supply runs, receipts for steel cable, camouflage netting, ammunition. They used my contractor account for some of it. Mara stared at him. You understood animals were being hurt? Wes looked toward Rook again. Not at first, he said. Then, after a painful pause, soon enough. That answer was worse because it was honest. Everett wanted to hate him cleanly. It would have been easier. But Wes was not Harland in polished wool. He was not Troy smiling beside a trap. He was a tired man who had made cowardice sound like survival until a wounded dog took the lie away from him. Lena gathered the materials carefully. This makes you a witness, she said, and possibly an accessory, depending on what the investigation finds. Wes gave a humorless nod, figured. Why come now? His eyes lifted to Rook. Because I heard about the dog, he said, and because they told me to clear the sites before you came up tomorrow. Lena stopped writing. Everett went very still. Wes looked at him. They know the state is coming. Outside, wind pressed snow against the windows. The lodge suddenly felt smaller. Near the hearth, Rook lifted his head despite the pain medication, as if the room itself had changed scent. Lena closed her notebook. Then we move faster. That evening, the weather report worsened. A major snow system would reach White Glass within 48 hours, perhaps sooner if the wind shifted. The county had not lifted the suspension. Lantern Ridge remained officially under review. The front door still wore the notice like a wound. Nadine stood beneath it with a mug of coffee in her hand, reading the words for perhaps the 20th time. Emergency lodging services under evaluation, she said bitterly. What do they want people to do? Freeze in a properly licensed manner? Mara, exhausted now, sat beside Rook and rubbed gently behind his good ear. Lena worked at the dining table, photographing Wes's map and copying files. Wes sat apart from everyone, shoulders rounded, keyring silent at last in his lap. Everett stood at the window. Beyond the glass, the road down from White Glass curved into blue dusk. Somewhere out there, storms were gathering themselves like armies over the ridge. He had built Lantern Ridge to be open when the mountain closed everything else. Now a paper on the door told him not to be what the place was made to be. Rook's eyes followed him from the hearth. The dog did not stand. Mara would not have allowed it. But his gaze held Everett with the same old steadiness, not asking for defiance, asking for truth. Everett looked at the suspension notice again. Was Lantern Ridge a business waiting for permission? Or was it a light? He did not answer aloud. Not yet. But before he went to bed, he checked the generator, filled the wood rack, tested the radios, and asked Nadine how much soup they could make if the road closed by tomorrow night. Nadine looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled like a woman who had been waiting for the right kind of trouble. Enough, she said. By the morning of the hearing, Alder Creek looked as though the sky had taken a white cloth and laid it over every roof, truck, fence post, and guilty conscience in town. Snow fell steadily, bright instead of dark, the kind that made storefront windows glow and church steeples look harmless. But the wind had teeth behind it. It moved down from White Glass Pass in long pale sheets, rattling street signs and pushing powder against the steps of the town hall. Everett Stone arrived early. He wore his olive-drab combat shirt beneath a dark winter jacket, the camouflage sleeves hidden except at the wrists. His boots left clean prints across the hall floor. He carried no weapon, no dramatic folder clutched like a man in a courtroom movie. Just a weathered canvas file case, a brass compass beneath his shirt, and the tired calm of someone who had already decided what mattered before anyone asked him to explain it. The Alder Creek Community Hall had seen weddings, town auctions, storm briefings, and one disastrous chili contest Nadine still referred to as the Cuman tragedy. That morning, it held nearly every kind of silence a town could make. Curiosity sat in the back rows. Fear stood along the walls. Money occupied the front. Harlan Vance sat near the aisle in a navy suit and charcoal overcoat folded neatly across his lap. He looked untouched by weather, time, or ordinary consequence. Beside him, Troy Vance shifted with visible irritation, one polished boot tapping under the bench. Troy's snow camouflage jacket had been replaced by an expensive dark coat, but arrogance still clung to him like cologne. Across the aisle sat Blaine Whitcomb, the mayor's adult son, with a burgundy tie and a smile too practiced for the room. His father, Mayor Alden Whitcomb, presided near the front, beside two county officials. The mayor had the damp forehead of a man discovering that family loyalty, public office, and state oversight made poor dinner companions. Lena Hartwell stood near the evidence table. She did not look dramatic either. That was her strength. In her forest green field jacket, with her mustard yellow notebook and expression like locked stone, she looked like a woman who had come not to win an argument, but to pin the truth to the wall and measure it. Mara sat beside Everett, a leather folder of medical reports in her lap. Nadine sat behind them, arms folded, wearing a red wool cardigan, and the expression of a woman prepared to feed the righteous and poison no one, only because laws existed. Miles had returned with his camera files and a stack of printed photographs. Evelyn Marsh sat with a neat bundle of typed statements, her reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Wes Calder sat alone, 2 rows back. His brown work jacket was clean, though still worn pale at the elbows. His big maintenance key ring was not at his belt this time. It lay in both his hands, silent. The hearing began with procedural language. It always did. Language was the first snow they shoveled over hard ground. A county official read the notice. Lantern Ridge Lodge had been placed under temporary suspension due to unresolved safety concerns following a guided trail incident. The same session would also receive evidence related to possible illegal hunting activity inside a protected wildlife corridor. Possible. Everett watched Troy smirk faintly at the word. Then Lena stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She laid out the coordinates of the traps, the photographs, the recovered trail camera images, the protected status of the corridor, and the chain of custody for the evidence Wes had turned over. Each detail landed without ornament, no thunder, just stone after stone. When Mara was called, she walked to the front with the controlled steadiness of someone used to delivering bad news in rooms that smelled of antiseptic and fear. I examined Rook, a 6-year-old German shepherd, after he was recovered from a steel snare in the white glass-protected corridor, she said. His injuries were consistent with recent restraint trauma. The snare caused soft tissue damage, circulation stress, and hypothermia risk. I also examined photographic evidence of a doe injured by a similar device. Harlan's lawyer, a thin man with silver glasses, asked whether Mara could prove who set the trap. No, Mara said. I can prove what the trap did. The room quieted. That matters, she added, because whoever set it knew pain would arrive before accountability. Everett looked at her then. Mara did not look back, but something in her posture said she knew he had heard. Miles presented his photographs next. He kept his jokes holstered for once. He showed the shell casings undisturbed in snow, tire ruts near the ravine, the Vance Summit emblem visible on an ATV, and the hidden fencing. His hands shook only once, when Troy muttered something under his breath and smirked. Evelyn followed. She did not speak like a witness trying to impress anyone. She spoke like a professor who had spent a lifetime teaching people that order was a kind of moral duty. She read times, names, weather conditions, trail positions, the moment Mara disappeared, the moment Rook was found, the moment Everett reported the traps. Then she began reading statements from townspeople who could not all fit in the hall. A trucker who had slept beside Lantern Ridge's stove during a whiteout, an elderly couple who had been given a room for free when the pass closed, a ski instructor who had followed Rook's bark back from the wrong ridge. By the time Nadine stood, the room had changed. Not dramatically, not enough for Harlan to lose his smile, but enough. Nadine did not bring papers. She looked at the officials, then at the front row, then at the townspeople packed shoulder to shoulder beneath the old rafters. "People keep calling Lantern Ridge a lodge," she said. "That's fine for brochures, but when the road disappears, nobody says, 'Find me hospitality services.' They say, 'Is the light still on?'" She pointed one blunt finger toward the mountain beyond the windows. "You don't call it a business when your hands are too cold to open your own car door. You call it the place still lit." No one moved. For once, even Troy Vance seemed to understand that laughing would cost him something he could not buy back. Then Wes Calder was called. He walked to the front slowly, as if every step had to pass through the months he had stayed silent. Lena stood near him, not comforting, simply present, the kind of presence that said truth was heavy, but it could be carried if held correctly. Wes described the fencing, the cameras, the supply runs, the steel cable purchased under his contractor account, the texts from Troy, the messages from Blaine telling him which dates to avoid because official eyes might be near the pass. Harlan's lawyer asked why Wes had not come forward sooner. Wes looked at his hands. "Because I was scared," he said. The answer was plain, ugly, and human. "My wife's treatment depends on insurance through Vance Maintenance. I told myself I wasn't asking questions because I had to protect my family." He swallowed. "Then I saw what my silence protected." He looked toward Everett. "I'm sorry about your dog." Everett did not absolve him. He only nodded once. That was all Truth could afford in that moment. The hearing might have ended there if the mountain had been content to remain scenery. But White Glass Pass had its own testimony. The emergency call came through one of the county radios near the front table. At first it was only static, then a dispatcher's voice, thin and strained. "Vehicle stranded on Upper Spur Road. 4 adults. Engine failure. Visibility dropping. Main rescue unit delayed by closure at mile 6. The hall shifted. Upper Spur Road. Every local knew it. A narrow winter road curling beneath the eastern ridge, officially discouraged, unofficially used by people who trusted GPS more than old men at gas stations. Mayor Whitcomb turned toward one of the deputies. "How far from Lantern Ridge?" The deputy checked quickly. "Closest shelter is Lantern Ridge, sir. Maybe 20 minutes from the spur in good conditions." "Conditions aren't good," Lena said. Harlan stood, smoothing his coat. Then the official rescue unit should handle it. This hearing should not be derailed by unrelated weather complications. Nadine made a sound sharp enough to cut bread. "Unrelated?" she said. Harlan ignored her. "We have procedures for a reason. A suspended operation cannot simply resume because of emotion." Everett stood. He did not raise his voice. "Those people don't need an operation. They need a door." The mayor looked trapped between law, weather, and the front row where his donors sat. "Mr. Stone," he said carefully, "the suspension." Lena cut in. "In an active emergency, preservation of life takes priority. Use of the property as a temporary warming point can be documented separately." Harlan's jaw tightened. Everett looked at Lena. She did not give him permission exactly. She gave him something better, a path that Truth could walk. Mara was already moving. "I'll get the medical bag." Miles grabbed his camera, then seemed to think better of it, and picked up a coil of rope from the emergency kit by the hall entrance instead. Nadine lifted her phone. "I'll call the lodge. Generator, stove, blankets, broth. And if anyone tells me soup requires a permit, I'll require them to chew the paper." For the first time all morning, a ripple of grim laughter moved through the hall. Everett paused at the doorway. A gust of snow blew in as it opened, and through that white flare he saw Rook. Nadine had arranged for him to be brought in the back of her old station wagon earlier, not into the hearing room but to a quiet side office where Mara could check his bandage between statements. Now he stood in the side corridor, shaky but upright, the white bandage on his hind leg bright against his black and gold coat. He had heard the movement. He had heard the call. He wanted to come. Mara's face tightened. "Everett, I know." Everett crossed to Rook and knelt. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath, though perhaps that was only the storm pressing against the windows. Rook's amber eyes were fixed on him, not pleading, ready. Everett placed both hands gently on the dog's neck, feeling the thick fur, the warmth, the tremor beneath the discipline. "Not this time, old man," he said softly. "This time you hold the light." Rook did not look away. Everett leaned closer, his voice dropping to something only the dog and the nearest ghosts might hear. "You already brought us this far?" Rook's ears shifted. Then, slowly, as if accepting a command he disliked but understood, he lowered himself beside the office door. Nadine wiped at one eye and pretended she had not. The rescue took less than an hour and felt like the old shape of Everett's life returning, but different. He did not go alone. Lena coordinated with dispatch from the hall. Mara rode with Everett, medical bag braced between her boots. Miles came in the second vehicle with 2 local volunteers who knew the spur road. Nadine directed the lodge by phone until the stove was roaring and every blanket in the building had been dragged downstairs. The snow thickened as they climbed. Visibility shrank to a tunnel of headlights and white motion. Everett drove by memory as much as sight, reading the slope, the drift lines, the places where the wind liked to lie. Mara did not tell him to slow down. He already had. She did not tell him to hurry. He already was. They found the stranded vehicle nose-deep in a drift near a bend where the road leaned toward a ditch. 4 adults huddled inside, frightened and half-numb, one with fingers too stiff to unbuckle his own seatbelt. No one was badly injured, but cold had begun its quiet theft. Mara checked them fast. Everett and the volunteers moved them into the rescue vehicles one by one, wrapping them in blankets, speaking little because warmth mattered more than reassurance. When they reached Lantern Ridge near dusk, the lodge blazed. Every front window glowed. Smoke rose from the chimney in a steady column. Nadine stood in the doorway like a general of mercy, red cardigan visible beneath her coat, shouting instructions before the vehicles even stopped. Inside, "Boots off if you can feel your feet. If you can't, we'll argue later." Rook lay just inside the entry, not blocking the door, but watching it. The first rescued woman saw him and began to cry, quietly, with the stunned gratitude of someone who had expected the world to turn white and final, then found fire instead. Everett looked from her to the dog, from the dog to the lodge, from the lodge to the snow still falling beyond the porch. No argument Harlan Vance made would survive that sight. The hearing reconvened in shortened form that evening, though everyone knew its soul had already decided. By then, the 4 rescued travelers were warming at Lantern Ridge. Statements had been taken. Dispatch logs confirmed distance, timing, and necessity. Lena submitted emergency documentation. Wes's evidence was entered for state review. The county officials, suddenly very aware of the townspeople watching them, conferred in low voices. The temporary suspension of Lantern Ridge Lodge was lifted pending full review. A formal criminal investigation into illegal hunting operations inside the white glass-protected corridor was opened. The Vance Summit Club expansion permit was frozen. Troy Vance, Blaine Whitcomb, and associated parties were barred from entering the protected corridor during the investigation. No one cheered. That would have made the moment too small. Harlan Vance left without shaking hands. Troy's face had gone red. Blaine looked as if he wanted to vanish into his father's shadow and had found it no longer large enough. Everett stood near the back of the hall, snow melting from his boots. Mara came to his side. "You won," she said quietly. He looked through the window toward the dark line of White Glass Pass. "No," he said. Then he thought of Rook lying by the lodge door, wounded but watching. Nadine, serving soup. strangers warming their hands, the front lamp burning against the storm. The light stayed on. For Everett Stone, that was better than victory. By late winter, White Glass Pass had begun to change its breathing. The storms still came. The wind still prowled the ridges at night and drove snow against the windows with old mountain impatience. But between the storms, the light lasted longer. Icicles along the eaves of Lantern Ridge Lodge caught the afternoon sun and turned briefly into crystal spears. Meltwater ticked from the porch roof in slow, stubborn drops, as if winter itself were reluctant to admit it could not rain forever. The traps came out one by one. Lena Hartwell led the official removal crews through the protected corridor with the grim patience of a woman cleaning poison from a well. State rangers, wildlife officers, and local volunteers moved in marked grids, unearthing steel snares, camouflaged fencing, spent casings, and the hidden scars men had left beneath snow. Some days, Everett went with them. Some days he stayed at the lodge because there were radios to install, firewood to stack, and people arriving with questions that sounded like apologies. Troy Vance and Blaine Whitcomb faced charges for illegal hunting, endangering public safety, and tampering with a protected wildlife corridor. Their names moved through Alder Creek differently now. Not like heirs, not like men to be humored at the bar, like warnings. Harlan Vance did not collapse in one grand public ruin. Men like him rarely did. His lawyers spoke, his companies reorganized. His statements expressed concern, cooperation, and disappointment in certain individuals. But the Vance Summit expansion was suspended indefinitely. His donations to the mayor's office came under review. The polished spell around him cracked, and once a town sees a crack, it begins to remember every leak. Mayor Whitcomb still had his office, but not his old ease. He no longer entered the diner to automatic greetings. He received nods now, small ones, measured ones, the sort of politeness that built a fence without using wood. Lantern Ridge Lodge, however, grew louder, not loud in the way resorts were loud. No glossy sign, no champagne opening, no brass plaque pretending kindness had been invented by a committee. Everett would have rather slept in the snow than let the place become a monument to itself. But the county officially recognized Lantern Ridge as an emergency winter shelter for the White Glass route. Lena helped establish the paperwork. Nadine claimed she survived the forms only by insulting them aloud. Mara drafted animal care protocols. Miles donated enlarged weather maps and trail photographs. Evelyn sent a framed copy of the testimony she had read at the hearing, though Everett kept it in the office rather than the lobby. The front room changed slowly. A bank of radios went up near the old map table. A weather monitor blinked beside the window. Everett reinforced the mudroom hooks so wet coats would not pull them down during crowded storm nights. A small side room became an animal triage space with washable mats, supplies, and a lockable cabinet Mara had organized so precisely that Nadine accused it of judging her pantry. Wes Calder fixed the side door. He did not rush it. That was perhaps why Everett gave him the job. Wes arrived most mornings in his worn brown work jacket, carrying tools in a dented metal box. He replaced the latch, then the frame, then the hinges, then discovered rot near the threshold and repaired that too. He worked with his head down. People in town did not know how to treat him yet. Some thanked him for coming forward. Others turned away. Wes accepted both like weather. One afternoon, Everett found him kneeling beside the door, sanding the new strike plate flush. "You already fixed it," Everett said. Wes kept sanding. "Not right." Everett leaned one shoulder against the wall. "It closes." Closing isn't the same as holding. That sentence stayed in the hallway after the sandpaper stopped. Everett did not absolve him. Forgiveness was not a coin to be tossed across a porch because a man had finally told the truth. But he let Wes keep working. Sometimes a person's first honest prayer was not spoken. Sometimes it was a hinge set correctly, a screw driven straight, a thing made safe after being neglected too long. Rook healed, but not into the dog he had been before. His hind leg regained strength slowly. Mara's instructions were strict. Short walks, no deep snow, no sudden climbs. No heroic nonsense, a medical category she invented specifically for Everett and Rook together. Rook obeyed most of it. Everett obeyed more than expected. On cold mornings, the old injury stiffened. Rook would pause at the top of the porch steps, one paw hovering slightly before he placed it down. The first time Everett saw it, grief moved through him so quickly he had to turn away. Mara caught him in the act. "He's not broken," she said. Everett kept his eyes on the snow. "He limps. So do most honest things by the end." He looked at her then. She shrugged lightly, as if she had not just handed him a small lantern and walked away. Mara did not move to White Glass. Not fully. She still had work in Denver, patients who needed her, a life half disassembled and not yet rebuilt. But every Friday evening, more often than not, her truck climbed the road to Lantern Ridge with medical supplies in the back and coffee gone cold in the cup holder. She taught volunteers how to approach injured wildlife, how to read pain in animals that hid it, how to tell the difference between helping and making oneself feel useful. With each visit, the tiredness in her face changed. It did not vanish. It became earned rather than empty. Miles came and went as well, documenting trail conditions for the new safety board and pretending not to enjoy Nadine's oatmeal. He took a photograph of Rook lying on the porch under a light snowfall, amber eyes narrowed, scarred ear lifted, looking like a retired general disappointed in civilian standards. He taped a copy beside the coffee station. Under it he wrote, "Rook for mayor, at least he doesn't take donations." Nadine laughed so hard she had to sit down. Everett, who had not laughed freely in months, surprised himself by joining her. Rook did not understand the joke, but he accepted the attention as his due. The lodge did not become peaceful. That would have been a lie. Storms still stranded people. Pipes still froze. The generator still chose dramatic moments to complain. Some nights Everett woke before dawn, hearing old wind, old roads, old failures. But when he reached for the brass compass beneath his shirt, it no longer felt like a stone. It felt like an instrument. A compass did not punish a man for having been lost. It only pointed. The night of the last great storm of the season came in late March. Everyone had thought winter was loosening its grip. Then the temperature dropped hard after sunset, and clouds rolled over White Glass like a dark army, returning for one final tribute. Snow began with delicate flakes, almost polite. By 10 o'clock, it drove sideways past the lodge windows, thick enough to erase the tree line. The call came at 10:37. A married couple from New Mexico, both adults, had taken a wrong turn near the old Ridge Road. Their engine was failing. Their phone battery was nearly gone. They could see no marker, only snow and one broken fence line. Lena's voice came through the radio from the ranger station, sharp with controlled urgency. "Lantern Ridge, this is Hartwell. We have coordinates, approximate. Volunteer team requested. Conditions deteriorating." Everett was already standing. Nadine began tying her apron tighter, which meant the world was about to be fed whether it deserved it or not. Wes, who had been staying late to inspect the generator after a flicker in the lights, set down his wrench and reached for his coat. Miles unfolded a wind map across the table. Mara, in the small triage room, lifted the radio to her mouth. "I'll coordinate medical from here," she said. "And Everett?" He paused by the mudroom. "Do not improvise unless absolutely necessary. That's a cruel thing to ask a former SEAL in a snowstorm. It's a medical order." He almost smiled. "Copy." Then Rook stood. He had been lying beside the hearth, chin on his paws, the firelight moving through his thick ruff. At first, no one spoke. The dog rose slowly, carefully, placing weight on his healed leg with deliberate control. He did not bound toward the door. He did not bark. He simply walked to Everett and stopped at his side. The room held its breath. Everett looked down at him. No. Rook looked up. It was not defiance. That would have been easier to refuse. It was recognition. This was the sound of a call going out into winter. This was the old rhythm of boots, radios, wind, and someone waiting beyond the visible world. Rook was not asking to prove he was still useful. He was saying he still belonged to the work. Mara came from the triage room, radio in hand. Her eyes moved from Rook's leg to his posture, then to Everett's face. "Just to the first marker line," she said quietly. "No deep trail, no search pattern. He can help orient the start team and then return." Everett stared at her. "You're the one who said he was a patient." "He is," Mara said. "And he is also Rook." That, somehow, was the argument that reached him. Everett knelt in front of the dog. The old fear rose in him, but it did not command him this time. He saw the scar near Rook's hind leg, the notch in his ear, the eyes that had watched him through guilt, danger, and silence. "You go slow," Everett said. Rook's ears lifted. "I mean it, slow." Nadine handed him the light orange reflective scarf she had knitted shorter and softer after the injury, so it would not snag. "If he's going out, he's going out visible." Everett fastened it around Rook's neck, then clipped a light line to his harness. Outside, the storm struck them like cold surf, but Everett did not step into it alone. Wes checked the generator before joining the second vehicle. Miles tracked wind drift and relay points from the lodge map table. Lena directed by radio from the ranger station. Mara monitored the stranded couple's symptoms through intermittent phone contact and kept the rescue team from making the kind of brave mistakes that became obituaries. Nadine turned the lodge into warmth. Blankets in rows, soup on the stove, boots by the fire, towels stacked like offerings. Rook walked beside Everett through the first stretch of storm. Not fast. Never fast. He kept to the packed snow near the marker posts, nose low, ears shifting beneath the wind. At the first ridge marker, he stopped and looked toward the old road. Everett followed his gaze. The wind had almost buried the reflective band, but there it was, half visible, enough to anchor the route. "Good," Everett said softly. Rook leaned once against Everett's leg. Then Everett did what would have been impossible months ago. He handed Rook's line to Mara, who had come as far as the lodge boundary in snow gear, medical pack on her shoulders. "Take him back," he said. Mara searched his face. He did not explain. He did not need to. Rook had shown the way. That was enough. A life did not have to be risked twice to be valuable. Rook resisted for one heartbeat, then accepted the turn. Everett watched Mara lead him back toward the lodge lights. The orange scarf glowed faintly through the snow, then vanished behind a curtain of white. Everett turned toward the storm. The team found the couple before dawn. Their car sat half-buried near the old fence line, exactly where the wind map and Rook's first orientation had suggested the drift would push them. The man had wrapped his wife's hands inside his coat. She was conscious but weak from cold. They were frightened, embarrassed, and alive. Alive was enough. By the time the rescue vehicles returned to Lantern Ridge, the eastern sky had begun to pale behind the storm. The lodge stood gold against the white world, chimney smoke rising straight for one brief windless moment. Nadine opened the door before anyone knocked. "Inside," she ordered. "Pride can freeze on the porch." The rescued couple stumbled in, wrapped in blankets, faces raw, eyes wet. Mara guided them toward the triage room. Wes took their bags without being asked. Miles logged the time. Lena's voice crackled through the radio, confirming the rescue complete. Rook lay beside the hearth. He raised his head when Everett entered, then let it fall again onto the toe of Everett's boot, as if the whole affair had been handled acceptably. Everett sank into the chair beside him. Around the room, people moved with tired purpose. Nadine ladled soup. Mara spoke gently behind the triage curtain. Wes stacked wet boots near the stove. Miles muttered something about naming the wind after local politicians. Someone laughed. Someone cried quietly into a mug. The storm continued outside, but it no longer owned the room. Everett looked down at Rook. The German shepherd's eyes were half closed. His scarred leg stretched comfortably toward the fire. His orange scarf had melted snow along the edge. He was not the dog he had been before the trap. Neither was Everett the man he had been before the lodge. Maybe healing was not returning to the shape you once had. Maybe it was learning that the new shape could still hold warmth. Everett touched the brass compass beneath his shirt. For years he had believed he built Lantern Ridge to save others from winter. Now, watching the room breathe around him, he understood the gentler and more humbling truth. Every light he had kept burning had been keeping him alive, too. Outside, White Glass Pass remained dangerous, beautiful, and old as judgment. It would never be tamed. It would never become safe merely because men signed papers and put up signs. But beneath it stood a lodge made of cedar, stone, stubbornness, soup, and second chances. A place where a wounded dog still rose when the call came. A place where a quiet man had finally learned that no one kept watch alone. By sunrise, the storm thinned. The first light touched the windows of Lantern Ridge Lodge and made them shine as if fire lived inside the glass. And in a way, it did. Not a fire that consumed, a fire that waited, a fire that welcomed, a fire that said, to anyone still lost beyond the trees, no one gets left out there. Sometimes healing does not come as a sudden miracle. Sometimes it comes as a light left on, a door opened in the storm, a faithful dog who still rises when someone is lost, and a community that finally remembers how to care. Lantern Ridge reminds us that God can use even our wounded places to shelter others. The scars we carry do not have to be the end of our story. They can become the very place where grace shines through. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us who has been a light for you in a difficult season. And if you want more stories of loyalty, courage, and quiet hope, please subscribe and walk with us again. May peace find your home tonight. And may you never forget, even in the coldest season, one small light can still guide someone back.